speaker to come. I thought that he would be on time, but I do want to tell you a little bit about him, and maybe he will walk in any minute. Mr. Frank Hubble is from Mapleton, and he is going to join us tonight. Over the years, over 25 years, he has collected 200 slides of outhouses. We're not going to see all 200 tonight, but that just gives you an idea of the variety in this kind of architecture. And Frank's program has been given in Indiana, Iowa, and Illinois. And he got the idea from a character that was made up by an author from Decatur. And this character, Chip Sale, was a vaudeville act. And the information was put into print and copyrighted and parlayed into a book and a movie career. And Soupy Sales based some of his, Soupy Sales honored Chip Sale by using part of his name in his act. So we'll as soon as Mr. Hubble gets here, we'll see what he has to tell us about outhouses.
Ta-da! My friend Herb Steinbach said that I should add to the ta-da. You think I might be a little overdressed for the subject? There's a reason, and I'll explain that in a moment or two. But I have to tell you a little story. I had this get-up on, and I was going to do the program for the Quad City Camera Club. And I was doing it at the Butterworth Center in Moline when John Deere's daughter got married to a Butterworth.
I'm looking for your microphone. Oh, you got it.
It's just the one holer. When I entered the Butterworth Center, and that was a house that John Deere built his daughter when she married a Butterworth. It's a mansion, and it's now a civic center. And as I entered the building, there were a few cleaning ladies just inside the door. And one of them said, "Oh, the Chippendales are here." What do you know about the Chippendales? You have to be careful. I asked that from one lady over in Glassford, and she said, "Well, one of them did a lap dance on my lap." I'm always a little nervous about doing this program in sanctuaries. I've done it a couple of times before, and I haven't been struck by lightning yet. Okay, at this point, I'm going to ask you to help me set the stage. And I'm going to ask you to assume that it's not 2011, but it's 1929. And this is a speaker's podium, not a music stand. And I'm your after-dinner speaker at a men's dinner club. Ladies, I'm just being truthful to the author. And I am no longer Frank Hubble with 2 B's and 2 L's, but I'm Lem Putt with 2 T's. Mr. President and gentlemen, you hear a lot of prating and prattling about this being the age of specialization. Well, I'm a carpenter by trade. At one time, I could have built a house, barn, church, or chicken coop. But I've seen the need of a specialist in my line, and so I studied her. I got her. She's mine. Gentlemen, you are face to face with the champion privy builder of Sangamon County. Luke Hardens was my first customer. He heard about me specializing and decided to take a chance. I built for him just the average 8-family 3-holer. With that job, my reputation was made. And since then, I have devoted all my time and thought to that special line. Of course, when business is slack, I do a little paper hanging on the side. but my heart is just in privy building. I give all my customers 6 months privy service free gratis. I explained this to Luke, and one day he calls me up and he says, "Lem, I wish you'd come out here. I'm having privy trouble." So I gets in the car and I drives out to Luke's place and hid behind them Baldwins where I could get a good view of the situation. It was right in the middle of haying time, and them hired hands was going in there and staying anywheres from 40 minutes to an hour. Think of that. I says, "Luke, you sure have got privy trouble." So I takes out my kit of tools and I goes in to examine the situation. First I looks at the catalog hanging there, thinking it might be that, but it wasn't even from a recognized house. Then I looks at the seats proper, and I see what the trouble was. I had made them holes too darn comfortable. So I gets out a scroll saw, and I cuts them square with hard edges. Then I go back and I takes up my position as before, me here, the Baldwins here, and the privy there. And I watched them hired hands going in and out for nearly 2 hours, and not a one was staying more than 4 minutes. I says to Luke, "I've solved her, and that's what comes of being a specialist, gentlemen." Elmer Ridgway was my second customer, and he come to me one day and says, "Lem, I thought I'd ask you to kind of estimate on a job for me." "You come to the right man, Elmer," I says. "I'll be out as soon as I get that roof on the 2-seater I'm putting up for the sheriff." A couple of days later, I drives out to Elmer's place, getting there about dinner time. I knocks a couple of times on the door, and I see that they got a lot of folks to dinner. So not wishing to disturb them, I just sneaks around to the side door and yells, "Hey, Elmer, here I am. Where you want that privy put?" Elmer comes out, and we get to talking about a good location. He was all for putting her right alongside a jagged path running by a big northern spy. "I wouldn't do it, Elmer," I says, "and I'll tell you why. In the first place, her being near a tree is bad. There ain't no sound in nature so disconcerting as the sound of apples dropping on the roof. Then another thing, there's a crooked path going by that tree, and that soil ain't too good for absorbing moisture. During the rainy season, she's likely to be slippery. Take your grandpappy. Going out there is about the only recreation he gets. He'll go out some rainy night with his nighties flapping around his legs, and like as not, when you come out in the morning, you're going to find him prone in the mud, or maybe skidded off one of them curves and wound up in the corn crib. No, sir," I says, "put her in a straight line with the house, and if it's all the same to you, have her go past the wood pile. And I'll tell you why. Take a woman, for instance. Out she goes. On the way back, she'll gather 5 sticks of wood. And the average woman will make 4 or 5 trips a day. There's 20 sticks in the wood box without any trouble. On the other hand, take a timid woman. If she sees any men folks around, she's too bashful to go direct out, so she'll go to the wood pile, pick up the wood, go back to the house, and watch her chance. The average timid woman, especially a new hired girl, I've known to make as many as 10 trips to the wood pile before she goes in, regardless. On a good day, you'll have your wood pile, or box, filled by noon, and right there is a saving of time. Now about the digging of her. You can't be too careful about that, I says. Dig her deep and dig her wide. It's a mighty sight better to have a little privy over a big hole than a big privy over a little one. And another thing, when you dig her deep, you've got her dug. You ain't got that disconcerting thought stealing over you that sooner or later you got to dig her again. Now when it comes to construction, I says, I can give you joists or beams. Joists make a good job. Beams cost a bit more, but they're worth it. Beams, you might say, will last forever. Course, I could give you Joyce, but take your Aunt Emmy. She ain't getting a mite lighter. Someday she might be out there when them joists would give way, and there she'd be catched. Another thing you got to figure on, Elmer, I says, is that Oddfellows picnic in the fall. Them boys is going to get in there in 4s and 6s, singing and drinking and the like, and I want to tell you, there's nothing breaks up an Oddfellows picnic quicker than a digging party. Beams, I say, every time, and rest secure. Now about a roof, I says, I can give you a lean-to type or a pitch roof. Pitch roofs cost a little more, but some of our best folks has lean-tos. If it was for myself, I'd have a lean-to, and I'll tell you why. A lean-to has 2 less corners for the wasps to build their nests in. And on a hot August afternoon, there ain't nothing so disconcerting as a lot of wasps buzzing around while you're sitting there doing a little reading, figuring, and thinking. Elmer, they ain't stylish, but they're practical. Now about our furnishings, I can give you a nail or a hook for the catalog, and besides a box for the cobs. You take your pa, for instance, he's of the old school, and naturally he'd prefer the box. So put them both in, Elmer. Won't cost you a bit more for the box and keeps peace in the family. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, I says. As to the latch for her, I can give you a spool and string or a hook and eye. The cost of a spool and string is practically nothing, but they ain't positive in action. If somebody comes out and starts rattling the door, either the spool or the string is apt to give way, and there you are. But with a hook and eye, she's yours, you might say, for the whole afternoon if you're so minded. Put on the hook and eye of the best quality, because there ain't nothing that'll rack a man's nerves more than to be sitting there pondering without a good, strong, substantial latch on the door. And he agreed with me. Now I says about the windows. Some want them, some don't. They ain't so popular as they used to be. If it was me, Elmer, I'd say no windows. And I'll tell you why. Take, for instance, somebody coming out, maybe they're just in a hurry, or maybe they waited too long. If the door don't open right away and you don't answer them, 9 times out of 10 they'll go round and round and look in the window, and you don't get the privacy you ought to. I says, now what do you want that door to swing? Opening in or out? He said he didn't know. So I says it should open in, say, about 45 degrees. That gives you air and lets the sun in. Now, if you hear anybody coming, you can give it a quick shove with your foot, and there you are. But if she swings out, where are you? You can't run the risk of having her open for air or sun, because if anybody comes, you can't get up off that seat and reach around and grab her without getting caught. Now, can you? And he could see I was right. So I built his door like all doors, swinging in, and of course facing the east to get the full benefit of the sun. And I tell you, gentlemen, there ain't nothing more restful than to get out there in the morning, comfortably seated, with the door about 3/4 open, and the old sun beating in on you. Sort of relaxes a body, makes you feel mighty, mighty restful. Now it says about the painting of her. What color do you want her, Elmer? He said red. Elmer, I says, I can paint her red, and red makes a beautiful job. Or I can paint her a bright green or any one of a half dozen other colors. And they're all mighty pretty. But it ain't practical to use a single solid color. And I'll tell you why. She's too darn hard to see at night. You need contrast, just like they use on them railroad crossing bars, so you can see them in the dark. If I was you, I'd paint her a bright red with white trimmings just like your barn. Then she'll match up nice in the daytime, and you can spot her easy at night when you ain't got too much time to go scouting around. There's a lot of fine points to putting up a first-class privy that the average man don't think about. It's no job for an amateur. Take my word on it. There's a whole lot more to it than you can see by just taking a few squints at your neighbors. Why, one of the worst tragedies around here in years was because old man Clark's boys thought they knowed something about this kind of work, and they didn't. Old man Clark, if he's a day, he's 97, lives over there across the holler with his boys, asked me to come over and estimate on their job. My price was too high, so they decided to do it themselves. And that's where the trouble begun. I was doing a little paper hanging at the time for the widder down by the old creamery. And I'd drive by, I could see the boys a-working. Of course, I didn't want to butt in, but I'd just say neighborly-like as I went by, "Hey, boys, see you're doing a little building." You see, I didn't want to act like I was butting in on their work, but I knowed all the time they was going to have trouble with that privy. And they did. From all outside appearance, it was a regulation job. But not being experienced along this line, they didn't anchor her. You see, I put in a 4x4 that runs from the top right straight on down 5 foot into the ground. That's why you never see any of my jobs upset on Halloween night. Here's what happened. They didn't anchor theirs, and they painted it a solid red. 2 bad mistakes. Halloween night came along darker than pitch. Old man Clark was out in there. Some of them devilish boys out for no good, and they upset her with the old man in it. Of course, the old man got to calling, and his boys heard the noise. One of them says, "What's that racket? Somebody must be at the chicken shed." They didn't find anything wrong there, and they started back to the house. And then they heard the dog bark. And one of the boys says, "Sounds like that barking's over toward the privy." It being painted red, they couldn't see that she was upset, so they started over there. In the meantime, the old man had gotten so confused that he started to crawl out through the hole, yelling for help all the time. The boys recognized his voice and come running, but just as they got here, he lost his hold and fell. After that, they just called, didn't go near him. So you see what a tragedy that was, and they tell me he's been practically ostracized from society ever since. Well, time passed, and I finally got Elmer's job done, and gentlemen, everybody says that next to my 8-holer, it's the finest piece of construction work in the county. Sometimes when I get to feeling blue and thinking I've hitched my wagon to the wrong star, and maybe I should have took up chiropractic or veterinary, I just pack the little woman and the kids in the back of my car and start out aiming to fetch up at Elmer's place along about dusk. When we gets to the top of the hill overlooking his place, we stops. I slips the gear in mutual, and we just sit there looking at that beautiful sight. There sits that privy on that knoll near the wood pile, painted red and white, morning glories growing up over her, and Mr. Sun bathing her in a burst of yeller color as he drops back of them hills. You can hear the dog barking in the distance, bringing the cows up for milking, and the slow squeak of Elmer's windmill pumping away day after day, the same as me. As I look at that beautiful picture of my work, I'm proud. I heaves a sigh of satisfaction. My eyes fill up, and I says to myself, folks are right when they say that next to my 8-holer, that's the finest piece of construction work I ever done. I know I done right in specializing. I'm sitting on top of the world, And I hope that boy of mine who's growing up like a weed keeps up the good work when I'm gone. With one last look as we pulls away, I slips my arm around the missus and I says, Nora, Elmer got himself a privy, a mighty pretty privy. Thank you, gentlemen. Did that work? Well, I'll just leave the jacket on. The book, The Specialist, I think Sue told you, was written by Charles Chick Sales from Decatur, Illinois. And the character he wrote about, Lem Putt, was from Springfield, Sangamon County. And he published the book. He had used this routine as a vaudeville act. And for some copyright reasons, he submitted it to print. And the book was so popular, he spent 6 months going around the country doing book signing. And then he parlayed that, I think you mentioned it, into a movie career. How many here have ever had to use an outhouse on a regular basis at home, church, school, work, visiting relatives, going out to the... Oh, better than 65%. I'm home free. Good. Okay. How many have a favorite outhouse story or reminiscence? And I know one person does. You're number one. You're number two. Who else had a hand up? Who was telling the story out in the foyer about tipping one over with somebody in it? You're number three. Yes. Well, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show a few slides, and then we'll have you stand and share your story with everybody. I'll show a few more. We'll go on to 2, show a few more, go on to 3. And if anybody thinks of one in the meantime, we'll just add you to the list. The slides that I show you were what I consider to be the better 80 of the 200 that my dad took over the last 20 years of his life. I lied just a little bit. I took that one. I was working in Clinton, Iowa, and living in Andalusia, downstream from the Quad Cities, and commuting to and from that job. This was alongside Highway 40, just south of Clinton. And I just thought it was so picturesque. I just think that it might have it might be wood shank shingles, and it's got a recycled door. And can you imagine if that was a hedge apple tree? Talk about disconcerting. Dad took this picture and made it into a slide, and this is at the Arsenal Island in the Quads in the island. It's the military island between Davenport and Rock Island, and this was the outhouse at the Confederate prisoner of war camp, and that's the outhouse right in the middle there. And I went to the museum and I asked the owner of the or the manager of the museum if she had any information about that outhouse or that federal prisoner of war camp. And she brought me this information. A little booklet that says, "Nothing is stagnant, not even history. As continued research clears the mists of time, more of our past comes into focus. This pamphlet was originally written in 1981 to answer continued public inquiries for information on the prison camp for Confederate soldiers that existed on Arsenal Island from 1863 to 1865. While the life of the camp was relatively short, the Rock Island Barracks stirred a controversy that long outlived it. Popular fiction and news articles presented a picture of the prison as an Andersonville of the North. But was it a northern counterpart of the southern hellhole, or was it merely a reflection of all prisoner of war camps of the period? The original, A Short History of the Rock Island Prison Barracks, while far from being a definitive work, suggested the latter. Okay. How many have ever been to Dixon for their annual festival? Anybody? You know what it is? It's the Petunia Festival. And somebody plopped this down in front of the Chamber of Commerce office, and it says, Dixon welcomes you. Make yourself at home. And on the inside it says, I had to get this blown up, get a couple of 8.5 by 10 pictures made for the chamber, one for the chamber office and one for my cousin that was the head of the building inspection department. Oh, he was the building inspection department. This will return to its southwest corn, Hemlock and R, tomorrow night. Dad, by the way, the comments that I say about each slide are usually what Dad had written on them. And on this one he wrote, south of Dubuque was chased off when taking. And that exploded a myth. My brother and I have just the one sibling, and we had thought that Dad had taken all these slides without any interference. But this time they ran him off. Dad wrote, sturdy type, south of Dubuque. The open door, south of Dubuque. I'd been showing this for a period of time, and somebody observed, well, Lem Putt didn't make that one. It opens out. Well, I checked my 60 or so miniatures, and they all open out. Dad took some slides every once in a while of sunsets, and I thought if I just showed one outhouse after another, that'd get a little dull. This is sunset, March '66. Illinois Public Specials near Quincy. Southern Illinois, resting in the woods. Prairieville, Illinois church, and my folks were living right across the street from this facility when I was born in Dixon Hospital. I don't know if some kind of imprinting is going on here or what. But here I am showing you this outhouse right across the street from where I was brought home from the hospital. Dad wrote cement block double near Rockford. Dad had a way of going to historic sites, and he'd start out front and he'd go by the restored John Deere home, and back to the restored blacksmith shop, and all the way back to the outhouse. And I went up there to attend a wedding several years ago, looked around for the outhouse, couldn't find it. Came back, was showing the program, and had somebody in the audience. They said, oh, we've got friends in Grandy Tour. They were going to throw the outhouse out. They salvaged it, and they store their garden tools in it. How many here did farming? Anybody? Were you green or red? John Deere or Farmall? Farmall. Good, good. Farmall. Yeah, my dad worked for 38 years for the IH at the East Moline Works, combine corn picker plant. Well, I tell you, I swear that they taught us when I went to school in Rock Island that John Deere invented the self-scouring polished mold board. Wrong. The book that the family commissioned the historian to write, He just took elements that were already in existence and put them into an improved design. Somebody else did the same thing about the same time and took old John Deere to patent court. And John Deere won, or we might have had plows by a different name. Whatever came of that Caterpillar John Deere dispute over the high drive? Did anybody hear the final outcome on that? Lawyers, anybody a lawyer in here?
Rich lawyers.
Yeah, I was going to say, a few lawyers are still battling it out.
Out in the cemetery, there's a gravestone, and there's a guy in this area that invented the moldboard plow.
I'll bet you
And that says that on his tombstone.
I'll bet you he's the one that old John was taken to court
And I
by.
don't know what his name is, but it's out there in the Washington Cemetery.
Well, we're going to go. What?
Wilhart. Yeah, that's it.
Wilhart?
Yeah.
Is that the name?
We want to stand up, and you're number one. And this isn't a microphone. This is a tape
We're
recorder.
going to record
And
this.
your name is?
My name is Bob Newkirk.
How old are you, Bob?
Well, that's classified, but it's about 69.
Okay, pretty close, huh?
Yeah.
What's your story?
Well, my story concerns my grandmother. My parents, they lived, well, my dad and my mom lived across the street from each other up on Edna Court over in the west side of Peoria. And one day, Grandma was out in the outhouse, and of course she fell in. And she was a big, stout woman. They had 5 boys and 4 girls. So I don't know how many of the boys it took to get her out of the outhouse, but she never lived that one down for a long time.
Thank you. Let's give him a hand. Oh, that barn, by the way, I've kind of upgraded the family tradition. I take pictures of barns, not outhouses. Gage, Illinois. Anybody know where that is? Down near?
Down around Windsor.
Down near Mattoon?
Yeah.
Windsor? Well, guess what? That's not it. That's on one side of town. This is a picture that Dad had made into a slide that shows what the 2-story outhouse was attached to at one time. Now they've preserved it and made it into a park. And they've even named the park after the guy that was mayor when they dedicated the park. Gene Goodwin.
I don't want to be on the bottom.
Well, the comment over here, somebody always has to say that. And what about being on the bottom? And what I want to do is go back and show you that upper section is boxed in all the way down to the ground. Does that put your mind at ease?
I hope so.
Do you know where there's a whole bunch of these things? 2-story outhouses that are still standing? There's a whole bunch of them in the west, in the northwest. When the snow would get so deep that you couldn't get into the lower one, you walked across the snow and got right into the 2nd-story one. Yeah, isn't that a beautiful barn? Isn't that? Dad wrote a little, this is he called just a field special. This was at Shake Rag Alley in Mineral Point, Wisconsin. Anybody ever been there? It's a mining town, a lead mine, and there's a bunch of houses with the back porch facing the mine. And the housewives would come out on the back stoop and shake their dish rags to signal lunchtime and dinner time. Hence, Shake Rag Alley. And Dad wrote, Pickle Church near New London, Iowa. Selma, Iowa. Last home of Blackhawk. Get the pretty pink one. And right next door, a pretty blue one. Now, he was not a chief. Everybody thinks a Black Hawk is a chief. He was really a warrior or a general on the battlefield. And I went to the Rock Island Historical Society, and they found the book for me that has this account. It was Madame Black Hawk. When he died, they buried him in a proper manner of a warrior in a setting position with a mausoleum of logs around it. It was Madame Black Hawk who, on one of her frequent visits to the grave, discovered that it had been robbed. In great distress, she carried the news to Mr. Jordan. A long quest followed in which Governor Robert Lucas of the new territory of Iowa took a prominent part. In fear of the law, the Quincy doctor, whose name was Hollowbush, seems to have betrayed Dr. Turner's secret. Dr. Turner was a dentist who had the grave robbed and was boiling the flesh off the bones, was going to hook them back together and charge admission to see them. So, upon the requisition of Governor Lucas, the mayor of Quincy forwarded the remains to Burlington on December 10, 1840. Having no place for their safekeeping, the Black Hawk family left them in the custody of the governor. They were then deposited in the Museum of the Genealogical and Historical Society of Burlington. And when that building was burned in 1855, Black Hawk's ashes were part of the debris. More than 70 years. Whoops. Did I have it up and I didn't mean to? I'm sorry. How many have seen this? Isn't it majestic? You know, it's lighted at night. It's if you travel from Oregon, Illinois to Rockford along the Rock River, you're on the west side of the river, and this is on the east side on a high bluff. More than 70 years after his death, Black Hawk's monument was reared not over his empty grave in Iowa, but on the east bank of the Rock River, 3 miles above Oregon, Illinois. There on a high bluff, a statue made of concrete, 42 feet in height, was erected. It was dedicated in July 1, 1911. Governor Franco Loudon presiding. The statue is that of a draped male figure, standing with folded arms, looking down the river, which was part of the Indians' last tragic trail. It is not in the likeness of Black Hawk, and not in the likeness of any particular Indian. Laredo Taft, the artist who designed it, said in it he sought rather to portray the Indian personality, a spirit unconquered while still belonging to a conquered race. And Laredo Taft is from Elmwood. Whoops, let's go forward, Frank. Dad rode a little tipsy in Wisconsin. Dad rode, this is in northern Wisconsin, and he rode well ventilated. And number 2, you're up. And your name is?
I'm Linda Newkirk.
And how old are you, Linda?
I'm younger than Bob.
And your story is, you know, I keep asking that. Someday somebody's going to punch my lights out.
Well, I grew up on a farm and we had an outhouse, and it was my job Saturday morning after we scrubbed the kitchen floor to take the scrub bucket and scrub the outhouse and put fresh lime in it.
Yeah. Did anybody ever get to paper one? When the folks were papering inside and you had scraps, a lot of times they'd take them out and put them in the outhouse.
No.
You just scrubbed yours.
Yeah, no.
Let's give her a hand. Dad wrote simply, Indiana, a pair of roadside relief stations. Ohio, handy to the woodpile. And here we have a picture that Dad thought should be made into a slide. He titled it Man on an Outhouse. I'd have gone with On the Horns of a Dilemma. Now, catch these three in sequence. This is Pennsylvania Turnpike Special Men, June '72. Pennsylvania Turnpike Special Women. And Dad observed the difference in the construction, and he did a little editorializing. Discrimination, women's lib. Main Street Special, St. Peter's Village, a little tourist place over near Reading, Pennsylvania. And if you follow this roof line, you'll see an outhouse. Here it is a little closer. And me when I had hair. And here we have Pennsylvania. This is convenient low to see out window. Anybody here hear any Pennsylvania Dutch in your background? Did you get taught any of the phrases? You know, throw the cow over the fence, some hay. The Pennsylvania Dutch, of course, weren't Holland Dutch. They were German. Deutsch got Anglo-Saxonized and came out Dutch. And they had a reputation for fracturing the English. And I guess Dad, he was in Pennsylvania Dutch land, so listen how he wrote this. He said, Pennsylvania, dash, convenient low to see out window. The reason that we have so many Pennsylvania slides is I was working as an addiction counselor at this facility. At the time I worked there, it was called Chit Chat Farms in Wernersville, Pennsylvania, an alcoholism and soft drug rehabilitation program. And this original building had been a part of a tourist site, and it had porches all the way around on all 4 levels at one time. And this was a new wing with a detox hospital in the dining room. And my parents came to visit, and because I was living right across the street from where I worked, Dad took that picture and a number of other Pennsylvania pictures. In the shade of the pine tree, he wrote. On this one, he wrote, a real fooler. He showed it as an outhouse for a period of time. And it's a smokehouse. There's a vent. This is a cupola is a vents the smoke. And I believe one of these is for ashes and the other's for air. And or vice versa. Dad showed it as an outhouse for a while. Dad wrote on this one, it's a shed roof in rural Pennsylvania, as Lem Putt would have called it, a lean-to type with a V vent. This is at Wheatland, and this is near Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Anybody? Which president? It's the restored home of... History teachers get this, and they're about the only ones. President Buchanan. And Dad wandered down the hall, past the dining room, out back, and there it is. Now that's actually a commercial one, and then he took this one. And on this one he wrote, this is a special, President Special, 5-holer, Mom, Pop, and Baby. And I thought, wait a minute, that's not your mom, that's your wife. Okay, it's my mom. And that's nobody's pop, that's my brother Tom before he was born. And that's my oldest daughter Jill when she was a teenager, she's no baby. He wasn't writing about the people in the picture, he was writing about the height of the holes and the size of the holes. Mom, Pop, and Baby Special. Dad wrote, Special Deluxe Design, Pennsylvania. Super Deluxe Design. And look at it, it's in the Rose Garden. Isn't that restful? But I don't think that's a stone one. I don't think you move it very often. And Dad wrote, Friendly Twin for Double House in Pennsylvania. Now, if I were to do this program in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, I wouldn't call it double house. I'd call it semi-detached. A double house was a semi-detached. The last house on a row of row homes was semi-detached. First time I heard that, I thought they were talking about the person's mental condition. But this is a double house with screened windows. And then this is the Ephrata, Pennsylvania cloisters, where the Seventh-day German Baptists lived from 1732 to 1834. And out back, all wrapped up into one, the women's, the men's, and the woodpile. And if anybody's done any carpentry, you know there's a little extra work in that peaked roof. That's also in Pennsylvania. We're at another historical site. We're at Williamsburg in the state of Virginia. And this is the Wyatt Home, get how proper the English are, the Wyatt Home Necessary House. And this is my dad trying it on for size and comfort. And here we are in front of the governor's palace again, and here's the formal garden in the back. And on each side of the property there's a covered path going back to one brick one in each corner. And another historical site. This is the Hermitage, the home of Andy Jackson. And Dad wandered by the monument back to the one in the outhouse and showed this to one audience, and the lady said, "Don't let your grandkids put their knees in there, they get caught." And this is just a rural house with toilet near Troy, Alabama. This is how they celebrated the bicentennial in Gulfport, Mississippi. And number 3, you're up. And your name is?
Bill Bradle.
And how old are you, Bill?
76.
76.
And I've got a couple of stories. When we were first married, my wife and I went up to a fishing place up in Lake Vermilion, Minnesota. And this guy was an attorney and he owned this island. And he had a 4-hole outhouse.
A 4-holer?
Yeah. And the whole front of it was glass. And you looked out on this beautiful lake.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And then the other story is when I was in high school, we were going to tip over a privy here in town. And one of the guys fell in up to his waist. Because he was pushing, and when the outhouse went over,
down he went.
In. That was a mess.
Let's give him a hand. Thank you. How about that one? This is one that I added to Dad's collection. I worked at a mental health center in Goshen, Indiana, or Elkhart, Indiana, and a Goshen College student came to work there after she graduated, and all Goshen College students, Mennonite school, had to go to a foreign country for 6 months of study. And she'd gone to Belize in Central America. And she came back with a picture of this, and I prevailed upon her for the negative and got the slide made. It usually evokes comments like, "Gee, you don't have to flush that very often," or "Gosh, you could set and fish." My Uncle Lloyd would send Dad slides, and this is at New Bernardillo, New Mexico, and I do believe it's an adobe, and you wouldn't move that very often either. And Dad just called this a screen door special, northwest of Lake Havasu City, Arizona. And get this one. This is a miner's twin special at a ghost town near Oatman, Arizona. And can you imagine being in there in a hot day? Or if there was if it rained pieces of ice, if you had a hailstorm. And we are in Springfield. Dad did his usual, wandering back. And this is Lincoln's answer to Mom, Pop, and Baby Special. Mom, Pop, and Baby Special. Now, I showed this for about 6 months, and I had a lady in the audience, and she said, you know, those are hoop skirt specials.
Oh, yeah.
Think about it. If you're wearing hoop skirt, you sit down on a plank, up she comes.
Yeah.
But this, you could just slip the hoop skirt right around it. This facility is in Grand Canyon. And I've had people in the audience that have used it, and like the view from the outhouse with the window, they tell me the view from this facility is magnificent. Now this little seat, one holder, is at the end of a short path or trail, and it intersects with the main trail. And there's a post at that intersection. And you're supposed to take off your cap, put it on the post, go back and use the facility. When you're done, retrieve your cap. I don't know what you do for privacy if you don't have a cap. And Dad just said, cloud formation. This is behind the smallest cathedral in the world. It's in northeastern Iowa. And I've got to go up sometime and get a picture because they say that the cathedral is smaller than the outhouse. This is across the street from where my folks live, and sunset on the golf course. Dad's just called this peephole special. And this was behind a one-room school. In Shelbyville, Mississippi. I hung around a hobby shop in my neighborhood in Rock Island so much they finally hired me to make display models and clerk. And when I go back to visit in Rock Island, I'd look up the owner who was retired. And Helen Canham said she went to a one-room school where the outhouse for the boys and girls had a common wall. And it had a crack.
Oh, yeah.
And the girls would go in, and then the boys would go in trying to sneak a peek. So she brought some red pepper powder to school, sprinkled it on the crack, waited till she could see the whites of their eyes, and went, and they all came out crying. Yeah. Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Isn't that nice?
Boys will be boys.
Yeah. And here's another little extra work for a few carpenters. Look at that four-gable roof. And here we have one in Illinois, painted red and white, so she matches up with your barn, and you can see her clearly at night when you ain't got too much time to go scouting around. And here's one holding up the clothesline. This is on an area in the Quad Cities referred to as Big Island. It's really not an island, but it's bordered on one side by the Hennepin Canal, another side by the Rock River, another side by the Mississippi. And I showed this to the Golden K Club, and Mr. Beaumont had this slide. This is on his property before the 93 flood, and this was after the 93 flood. Dad thought this deserved to be made into a slide. There are 13 ladies waiting on a bus ride tour, and just one guy. He called it rest stop. You know, when they built the new Civic Center in Moline, the Mart, they put in twice as many toilets as they did for the ladies. And when they remodeled Soldier Field, they put in twice as many toilets as for the ladies. This is 4 generations. That's my daughter Jill when she was just a year old. My grandfather Frank Hubble when he was 92. My dad Henry, and me with a crew cut. How many have ever been to Florida and done any beach combing and collected your shells? And you get up in the morning and you got to organize them? Well, Dad was organizing his shells, but he just wasn't quite fully clothed. So Mom grabbed the camera, and now we have this picture for posterity. Thank you.
Outhouse story.
Oh, well, heavens, let's get it on the tape. Your name is?
Bill Butler.
And how old are you, Bill?
How old am I? I'm going to be 80 in about 3 months.
All right.
Anyway, I used to be an antique dealer in Houston, in Texas, and they had a big antique market. And for about a 5-year period, they became a specialty in selling outhouses. You know, people, I don't know what people do with them, but man,
They put them on their swimming pool decks for cabanas.
Or but people were buying those outhouses.
Or they put them out by their gardens to store their garden tools.
Never heard of that before, but they were very popular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's give them a hand. Because it's the most commonly asked question, I'll just answer it before it gets asked. Where did the star come from for the men? Where did the crescent moon come from the women? And in one of the books that you used to be able to buy at the Cracker Barrel, the Vanishing Outhouses of Wisconsin, and he had another one of Vanishing Outhouses of Illinois, and another about 4 or 5 Midwestern states. In one of those books he wrote that when the English came to this country, they would build one for the women with the crescent moon because that was a sign of femininity. And they would build another one with a star because that was a sign of masculinity. Well, I was giving this program up at Three Sisters Park one time when the Pinta, that was the one that used to come through first, and now it comes with another one, the Nina or something. And they were docked over there at Ham's. And one of the crew came to the program and he said, wrong. He said, the sign of masculinity is a sunburst. Well, it just kind of morphed into a star. Well, when they went westward, they stopped building the ones with the star. They said, oh, the guys can go out in the woods. With that, I think I went way over my time.
That's fine. Anyone who wants to talk to Frank, feel free to do that, or join us for coffee and tea and cookies. And thank you again for coming.